Hey everyone, I'm Jennifer Whitacre, and this is the next video on my series on videos of autism to help everybody understand autism just a little bit better. So today we're going to talk about the double empathy problem. The diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder claims that autism is characterized by deficits in social interaction and communication. Because of this so-called defining characteristic that's outlined in the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. The general belief about autistic people is that we have an impaired understanding of social life and of other people. And because the DSM is deeply rooted in the medical model, a model that pathologizes autism and, well, it pathologizes anything that's included in the book, these ideas have infiltrated mainstream society and mainstream ideas and attitudes around autism as being a deviance from so-called normal development and cognitive functioning. Now, it is true that autistic people can struggle to process and understand the intentions of others during social interactions. But guess what? That's true for neurotypical folks as well. This goes both ways. Thus far, the burden of adapting in social interactions has been placed solely on the shoulders of autistic folks. It's called ableism. We are the ones who are expected to understand allistic and neurotypical folks. Allistic is simply a word that means not autistic. And neurotypical is a word that suggests that a person or a certain brain functioning conforms to typical processing. But what about this being a two-way street? Maybe it's time for allistic and neurotypical folks to listen to us and understand a better way instead of it always being the other way around. And one way we can begin to understand these basic differences in communication styles between neurodivergent and autistic individuals is looking through the lens of the theory of double empathy, which is also called the double empathy problem. This can help us understand why there can be communication breakdown between autistic and neurotypical folks. According to the National Autistic Society, double empathy suggests that when people with very different experiences of the world interact with one another, they will struggle to empathize with one another. And this is likely to be exacerbated through differences in language use and comprehension. Now, notice that nowhere in that definition of double empathy does it say anything about neurology or autism or neurodivergence or neurotypical. It's different experiences of the world. So everyone is subject to the double empathy problem. Recent research studies from the University of Nottingham, from the London School of Economics, and from the University of Texas at Dallas have shown that in experimental conditions, non-autistic people struggled to read the emotions of autistic participants, and they tend to form negative impressions of autistic people. Now, those are usually things that are put on our shoulders as autistic folks. We're to blame for not understanding neurotypical folks, but again, this goes both ways. These studies suggest that the dominant medical pathologizing theories of autism are, in part, a reason why this bias against autistic people exists. Autistic cognition alone is not to blame, according to the double empathy problem. What's more likely the cause is a breakdown in reciprocity and mutual understanding that can happen between people with very different ways of experiencing the world around us. And sometimes even people who live in the same household, spouses, parents, children, siblings, have very, very different experiences of the world, and we might not understand it, even though these are the people we're closest to. So this is more than just learning to communicate with someone from, let's say, a different culture or who comes from a different part of the country, even though such scenarios also apply. The theory of double empathy suggests that those with similar experiences are more likely to form connections and bonds and come to greater levels of understanding. And this has ramifications in regard to autistic folks having a community where they can interact with other autistic folks. In other words, it's really important to have an autistic community if you're an autistic individual, instead of trying to force ourselves to mask and ableize and just fit into this so-called normal society. The study also suggests that autistic people don't lack empathy to the degree that the DSM suggests. There are actually two main types of empathy: cognitive empathy and affective or emotional empathy. Cognitive empathy involves knowing how other people think and feel, while emotional or affective empathy involves feeling another person's emotions. Cognitive empathy is perspective taking, imagining yourself in someone else's shoes. Affective or emotional empathy is shared emotional experiences or feeling another person's emotions. So cognitive empathy can help us imagine what another person might be experiencing, while affective empathy means one person is experiencing distress in response to another person's pain. Cognitive empathy can bring us to deeper levels of understanding, while affective empathy is more likely to lead to action to help another person. So that action-taking step is kind of a subset of affective empathy, and that's called compassionate empathy. Cognitive empathy is not necessarily a shared experience, while affective empathy is. Now, research is showing that neurotypical folks tend to have higher levels of cognitive empathy, while autistic folks tend to have higher levels of affective empathy. So that means neurotypical people might know what to say in a situation, while neurodivergent or autistic people might not have the right words, but they're with you in your emotional response. So to illustrate this difference, let's say that your spouse just served you with divorce papers. A neurotypical person might say in response, "I'm so sorry. I know you're sad and what you're going through is difficult." A neurodivergent person or an autistic person might say, "I'm so sorry to hear about your divorce proceedings. I know this is shocking and that you'll really miss them. I'm here for you." The neurodivergent response might also include an expression of shock or an outward display of emotion, such as a cracking voice or tear-filled eyes. One response isn't better or worse than the other. That's not what this is about. They're just different. And this is why a little education can help us understand each other better and communicate better and get along better. So maybe let's stop trying to force other people to adapt to our ways and start understanding why another person's ways are different in the first place. And that requires understanding different experiences. So I hope this helps explain a little bit about the double empathy problem, and I hope it gives you some information about why sometimes communication can break down. And my hope is that you'll be willing to understand the other person a little bit better. All right, everyone, I'll see you next time. Happy self-discovery.